Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Casual Climbers, the podcast by and for beginning hikers and those who may not quite be physically ready to tackle the Appalachian Trail. I'm your host, Roy Padrick, and alongside me, as always, is my wife and adventure buddy, Donna.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here.
In this podcast, we provide you with information, tips, and tricks on how to get into hiking in the Blue Ridge area. We will cover hundreds of trails in the various parks in the region and hopefully entertain you along the way. We're two middle-aged, not in the best shape hikers who love the outdoors and want to share our experiences with you. So let's get into it.
Let's go.
For this week's special segment, we thought we'd tell you why we started this podcast. So Donna and I moved to the upstate South Carolina area in April 2023 after having lived decades in Florida. Now, hiking in Florida is a very different experience than here in the mountains. It's flat. It's incredibly hot.
Yeah.
And the mountains are a different kind of challenge, right?
Florida's pretty miserable.
So, as you may have guessed by our podcast title, we're not in top physical condition, but we still love to get out in nature and exercise. You know, at 48, my body is not exactly the same as it was when I was a spry 19-year-old in the Navy. My knee has been replaced. My bones hurt when I get up in the morning. And probably like a lot of you, I have a job that keeps me tied to a chair all day.
Yeah, and I'm 54, and I've been a hairstylist for most of my life. And that's hard on the body, too, in a different way than sitting in front of a computer. My shoulders are really not where they used to be. They're pretty bad. And my back hurts, and I do have a bum knee as well from an injury a couple years back. So yeah, we're moving a bit slower than we used to. Yeah.
Sure, and I'm sure a lot of new hikers are like that. People maybe our age or even older. And so this podcast is really for them. And when we moved here, we were really looking forward to hiking these amazing trails. We bought gear that was recommended and started listening to a lot of different hiking podcasts. And after listening to about a dozen of them, I started getting disillusioned by how they were not really targeted toward me and you, brand new hikers. So, and every tip and trick they gave, you remember, as well as the difficulty in times, which was my big sticking point, they were targeted toward experienced hikers. So what we found was that we were nowhere near that skill or physical ability level.
Nowhere near.
So, and many people we met on the trails were in the exact same boat as we were, and were equally frustrated with the difficulty and completion time projections that these podcasts and many popular hiking apps use.
Yeah, because if you're going to start out on a hike, let's say you're going to start out on a hike that at the end there's a waterfall. If you can't make it to the waterfall, then that's pretty disappointing. I mean, if you know that you're just going to go on a leisurely stroll in the woods, just a little bit in and a little bit out, not trying to get to that waterfall, that's different. But these promises of this gorgeous view or this waterfall or whatever, and then you're huffing and puffing and you can't get there. That's not great.
Right. You know, so that's why we decided to make something that we, as beginner hikers, would have found very useful when we started out. And we both hope that you find it just as useful.
Yeah, I want to make sure and let people know where the benches are and what my recommendations are for using that bench.
So let's get into this week's hike. So the first hike today is the Mountain Creek Trail, which was a nice trail, and here it is by the numbers. The distance is 2.83 miles from the park center to the terminus at the Sulphur Springs parking area and back. The time it took us was 1 hour and 23 minutes, moving at a leisurely pace.
Right, yeah.
The elevation gain is 161 feet, and it is wheelchair unfriendly, but very kid-friendly. We saw a lot of kids, a number of dogs, and a lot of hikers on our trek yesterday.
Yeah, it's a very serene hike along ridges and creeks. It's called the Mountain Creek Hike, but we were a little disappointed in the lack of creek views. that you have a section of it where you can really appreciate the creek. And there's a few places where you cross over a little creek area, but I thought the name being Mountain Creek, I thought there'd be a lot more creek involved.
Right. It's a serene hike, right?
Hmm.
It's nice and pleasant, but you're right. If you're going to call it Mountain Creek, you should see it for more than 20 yards
Yeah,
along the
yeah.
hike.
Of yeah, the 2.83 mile. Yeah. So mountain bikes are allowed. They're usually very polite. You just get off the trail a little bit when they come by. They'll say on your left if you don't see them first, and just get out of the way. We always see them first usually. You let me know when they're behind us, and I see them when they're in front of us.
Yeah, the only problem that some people will need to be aware of is that some of these trails are very curvy and twisty, and so they can be coming around a corner
Mhm.
and you not necessarily see them. We've never had an issue where we had to dive out of the way or anything. But, some of these mountain bikers move very quickly,
Yeah.
and so you do have to keep an eye on any trail that is mountain bike and hiker
Oh,
accessible.
yes. The onus is on the mountain biker to not run over the hiker, but if a collision happens, the hiker is the one that's going to probably get more injured. So, you know, you're both just equally as motivated to keep an eye out for each other.
Right, right. So,
So,
so what did you like about this one particularly?
okay, so you have the elevation gain, but you don't really feel it. It's not like any kind of steep straight up, any kind of thing. It's just a gradual elevation gain. I didn't feel like I was, you know, needing to really climb. Really,
Right. Yeah, I didn't feel any severe climbs. So here's a pro tip for you. If you start out at the park center, the ascent is going up the mountain to the Sulphur Springs parking area. If you start at the park center and go up, then the way back down on
yeah,
your second half of your hike is a much easier one.
true. We did the reverse, and it wasn't bad. It was about what, 54 degrees when we did it.
Yeah.
So it was nice because it was kind of like hiking in air conditioning for these two Floridians. I always start out with my hat and my gloves and stuff like that, but they always end up going in the backpack as we hike, and that was true yesterday as well. In fact, at the end of that hike, I had a vest on to keep me warm, and that also went in the backpack.
So yesterday we actually brought our water bladder backpacks with us that have about a gallon of water in a water bladder with a tube that comes to the front of the backpack and connects so you can easily get it without having anything in your hands.
Without having to stop, you can just grab the little tube and suck some
Y-
water in, and
Right.
yeah. And a lot of these kind of backpacks, they can only hold water, but our backpacks have some extra zipper compartments, so I had a place for my vest and my hat and my gloves as I got hot.
Right. So one of the brands, popular brands out there is Camelback. But if you go on Amazon or any retail website, you'll be able to find all different kinds of brands at varying prices. Again, it's one of those things where it's not necessary. You certainly could have carried a water bottle with you. And on a 2.83-mile hike, I definitely recommend a water bottle, at least a 1 liter water bottle to carry with you. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Eh,
Yeah, and I had some walnuts and pecans to snack on too, and I was really glad that I did, because you get to a point where your energy is waning, and just that little snack. You had some beef jerky.
I
I
had
had,
beef jerky. Yeah.
yeah, and it really helps me to keep going. That sustained energy, and then the water, of course.
Right. And in the water. So you can just get whatever you need on any online store if you need to. Again, it's not one of those things where you need to carry this, but it is, we do find it helpful.
Hmm. So yeah, popular for dog walkers, fairly easy hike, elevation gain. It passes through the amphitheater, which makes this hike significant, and one of my I really, just coming upon the amphitheater, it's an amazing thing in the middle of the woods, trees all around, and there's this amphitheater, and
So what kind of things do they do at the amphitheater?
they have something called music in the woods, and we didn't make it to that. It was in the summer, and we meant to make it to one of those music, performances. It's varying artists, varying types of music.
They had the Greenville Symphony Orchestra this year play, along with, they have folk musicians,
Mm-hmm.
they have bluegrass, they have all different kinds of things. The actual amphitheater was built in the 1940s by the Civilian Conservation Corps as a training area. So all of the CCC workers would come, and there's stone steps, a number of stone steps, and we'll post pictures on our website of all this stuff for you.
Yeah.
It's casualclimbers.podbean.com. It was originally a training area. There's stone steps in a semicircle that are facing a stage.
Mm-hmm.
And as it says, it's literally right in the woods. So it's really kind of a neat place.
So I didn't know it was a training area. What did they train them to do?
So they would do training sessions on like how to saw logs properly, how to build fencing, how to,
It's almost like a Boy Scout kind of thing? Or
yeah,
what?
the Civilian Conservation Corps was basically grown out of the Depression as a way to give out of work people jobs.
Ah.
And so the Civilian Conservation Corps actually built Paris Mountain State Park and all of the buildings inside of it, including the dam and the valve system that we're going to talk about in our next hike. So that was a way for them to just get an auditorium style training in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, and I remember reading that their motivation was that we're going to build things, but we're going to make them just sort of seamlessly sort of blend in with the nature around. And so they used the materials that were around when they built bridges in Paris Mountain State Park and that kind of thing.
The boardwalks and the bridges are built from wood that are there
Mm-hmm.
on the state park to kind of blend it into its own natural environment. And
Yeah.
I think that's really great. And you can tell the log buildings that are there really blend into the landscape.
Yeah, the park center where you can either start or end this particular hike used to be bathhouses for the swimming area down there.
Right. There is a swimming area, as we talked about last time, at Paris Mountain. And so right when you start the Mountain Creek Trail, if you start at the park center, that's Lake Placid. There's a swimming area there at Lake Placid. So if you're doing this hike in the summer, it might make really good sense to you to do the hike and then come back and dip your toes in the water.
A little bit of a swim to cool
Yeah.
off. Yes, that would be a beautiful thing. But yesterday was too cold.
A little too cold.
Yeah, New Year's Eve.
So how would you rate this?
How would I rate it? In our rating, the breaking a sweat category is, I
Sure.
think, yeah,
Yeah,
it applies.
it barely gets out of the piece of cake category just because of
Yeah.
the elevation gain.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like when I say break a sweat, I'm not talking about, dripping with sweat. I mean,
No.
just a little bit, but I was ready to rest at the end of this hike. And we rested on benches and stuff in between.
Right. Yeah. One of the nice things about this particular hike is kind of nestled right in the middle of the hike, out of the way of anything else in the park, is this little area by the creek that has multiple picnic benches
Mm-hmm.
and some other benches there that I know the Boy Scouts use for training
Teaching.
and teaching sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like totally out of the way, and you have to take this trail to get to it. There's no other way to get to this little
Yes.
picnic area.
And it's even hidden a bit from the trail. So there's brush and trees and
Right.
bushes and stuff around. So it's a really cool place. It's really close to, if you're coming from the Sulphur Springs parking lot, then you'll pass this sign that says To Turtle Trail, which we didn't do it this time, but we've done it before, where you can go over. It's just a little ways. You can see the bridge that's crossing over the creek, but it's so beautiful. Every time that you see a bridge that's crossing over a creek, it's worth it to stop and just go take a look.
Right.
Take a few
Just
pictures.
take a few seconds out of the trail and, walk 25, 30 yards off
Yeah.
and see the creek. Because some of these creeks, they're most of the time they're very shallow.
Yes.
2, 3, 4 inches max, but sometimes they get a little bit deeper, and you can find fish in them
Mm-hmm.
and wildlife. It's really pretty nice. So how did you like this compared to some of the other trails at Paris Mountain?
That, you know what? Paris Mountain does such a good job of, I mean, in my limited experience, they do such a good job of giving each trail a different feel, I think.
They do have personalities, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bends in the path, and the way it goes up on this side and down on that side, and I don't know, the different greenery, or well, I guess, there was a lot of trees that had lost their leaves at this point in the year for us, but there was still areas that had a lot of
There were
green.
some that had green, the mountain laurel leaves stay green, and I think there's some rhododendrons in there that stay green. It's nice. It's a very serene hike. And so if you're looking for something that is a little longer than the shorter Turtle Trail or the one we're going to talk about next, but is still not very difficult, this is a great hike for you.
Yeah, it's kind of a middle of the road. It's not so crazy easy that you feel like, well, I haven't even been hiking at all, but it's also not so hard that you're going to break yourself.
Right, right. There are some in the park that are very challenging. We'll get to those in the next few weeks, but this one was a good little hike. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it took us about an hour and 23 minutes at a leisurely pace, so it was definitely a good use of an hour and a half time.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about this one, on our final parting note, is there are 3 bathrooms at different stages in this, right?
Yes, beginning, middle, and end, pretty much.
Right. So if you park at the park center, and there's bathrooms there as well as the park center store where you can get various sundries, drinks, baubles, t-shirts, all the good stuff that Paris Mountain Park Center has.
Yeah.
There's another bathroom halfway, and
Right.
then there's another bathroom at the pinnacle, which is Sulphur Springs parking area. And then on the way back down, there's obviously the same ones.
Right. Yeah. You can, if you want to hit that middle bathroom, there's a little, like, you get to this area where you can either go left or right around this.
It's a picnic area with a pavilion.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You would have to take the lower path, not the higher path, to get to that, but you can kind of tell, I think.
Yeah, you can still see it right before you get to the crossroad there where you go. Both trails, the lower and the right, end up at the same spot.
Right. They just kind of go around a little mound.
Wooded area, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So overall, great trail.
Yep.
We hope you enjoy it as much as we did. And now we're going to talk about the Mountain Lake via Sulphur Springs Trail, one of my favorites in the park.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is by the numbers. The distance is 1.2 miles from the Sulphur Springs parking area there and back. It took us 48 minutes at a very, very leisurely pace. You could likely get this done in half an hour easily.
Yeah, it takes us 48 minutes. Were you still measuring time when we were just at the waterfall part of it? And
no, I only measure active time.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, yeah, because time can stand still for me when I'm at a waterfall.
Yeah, as it does for me too. The elevation gain is fairly small. It's only 56 feet. There's very little elevation gain. And the trail itself is very kid-friendly, very dog-friendly, but not so much for wheelchairs. There are a couple boggy parts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of roots, and there's times that you have to cross over the creek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm trying to, because there's these sections that are boardwalk. They've built boardwalk up for like marshy areas. Mm-hmm. And it is ramped. So I guess you could get a certain ways in, but not the whole trail.
Not the whole trail. Yeah. It is one of the easier hikes in the park. There's great parking at the Sulphur Springs Park. It's probably the largest parking area short of the main one all the way down by the entrance of the park that there is in the park itself.
Yeah, and ironically, this one you pass over creeks a lot. You pass over creeks in the Mountain Lake via Sulphur Springs hike more than you do in the Mountain Creek.
A lot more. Yeah. It's funny. It is. I wonder if the Mountain Creek one that we just covered is ironically named.
Right. Yeah. Somebody's trying to be funny.
Yeah. And so what I really love about the Sulphur Springs Trail is that you are following the creek almost the entire way.
Yeah.
There are many, many times where it is maybe 10 yards from the trail itself, sometimes less than that. I would say that there are maybe only 1 or 2 small stretches, and by small stretches I mean 20, 30 feet, where you can't hear the creek babbling alongside of you.
Right. Yes, and I wanted to point out that this is the trail where there is this big gazebo in the middle, like about halfway between the parking area and the pinnacle of this hike. There's just this big gazebo that I don't even know how many people, lots of people could sit in this gazebo.
Easily 50
You
in
think?
this octagonal gazebo, and it's made from wood there at the park.
Yep.
It's a nice place to go. We have gone there when we brought a charcuterie meats and cheeses, and we just stop and have a dinner there. It's a really nice place. That you can hear the creek because the creek is maybe 10 yards away from the gazebo.
And I will say in northern South Carolina, I don't know about other places. I know about Florida and I know about northern South Carolina now, but you'll get rain here that's not like dumping on you like Florida does. It's just kind of lightly raining all day long. If we did this hike one time and it was like drizzly rain, and so it's kind of nice. I mean, we had our raincoats and stuff, but it was kind of nice to go and sit in that gazebo. And I think that day that we had the meat and cheese with us, I think it was like a rainy day. I'm not sure.
It was a little rainy, yeah, and there were a couple people in there. One young lady was in there with a dog, and you get a chance to meet and say hi. So it is a nice place to stop halfway through. But honestly,
You don't
this
need
is
to
such
stop.
a short
Yeah.
hike. You don't need to stop. And we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. So tell them about the best part of this hike.
The waterfall at the end, the dam, it's just so pretty. So when you get to the end, you can climb these stone steps up to the mountain lake, to the main part of the water, or what we tend to do more often than not is to climb down to the base of the water. This is the part where I recommend that you do have the right shoes and hiking poles. Climbing down is a little bit it can be slippery. It can be the steps down are not really steps.
They're not steps. It's more like roots and elevation
Rocks.
changes of rocks.
Yeah.
It is definitely not designed for
Going up,
easing of traversal.
right. Going up is more like steps. Going down is more like, hey, take your own life into your hands if you want to when you're going down. But
Yeah.
there's kind of these little trees that you can I don't want to really like hang on to trees as I'm going down because I'm afraid I don't want to break a tree, but they seem sturdy.
Yeah, they're sturdy. This is definitely an instance where the hiking poles, I find, are really helpful because they help you balance going down. And again, these aren't real steps. There are no handrails.
Right.
So it is a do at your own risk type thing.
If you're drawn to the water, then and you're willing to take the chance. I mean, being unfit hikers in the Carolinas, it's when I get there, it's always like, do I or don't I? And then if you go, then I'm kind of like, well, okay.
I usually always go.
Yeah, and now I have to go because I can't let you go and me not go. That's just not a thing. Like
it's just so great when you get to the bottom, right there at the creek bed, and looking up at this 40-foot tall dam that is just cascading water from the mountain lake. So here's an interesting point about the dam and the waterfall itself. It was built in 1890, and the mountain lake, which is fresh water, was used to deliver water to downtown Greenville. I guess the best way to describe it would be a stone cupola that housed the valve system, and it's still there. You can still see it, and it's really kind of very picturesque, right? It looks kind of like a castle tower.
Yes.
Right next to this waterfall. And so they used to, in the 1890s and all the way up until the 1940s, that mountain lake used to deliver water to downtown Greenville, which is only 5 miles away from there. And so it's really gorgeous. If you climb up to the top of the dam, you can get an amazing view of the lake itself. And so it's really gorgeous. This particular hike, since it's so short, takes less than an hour to complete, is one hike that you and I do very, very often. It's a great after work hike for us.
Yes, because the park closes at 6 p.m. They lock the gates at 6 p.m. But you get off at 4. I get off at 4. We can easily make it over there, do this hiking,
before they close. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember also, I don't know if you remember, because we first moved here in April of 2023, and so we got to see the mountain laurels, and the mountain laurels around there were just beautiful. And so somebody had put flowers inside that castle looking thing,
Yeah.
and it was really pretty. But it's pretty any time of year. I like to take a picture. In fact, I'll put it on our website. I like to catch the blue sky through the top of that circle thing, that the housing concrete.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's very picturesque. It's really wonderful. And at the very top of the dam, there are benches there that you can sit down and rest
Mhm.
before you head back down. There's also, it's not technically part of the trail, but there is a handicap parking area at the end of another connecting trail at the top of the lake. So if you're standing at the top of the lake, there is a short trail, I would say maybe 0.3 miles, if that, that leads to a handicap parking area.
Mhm.
And so that is one area in the park where I think wheelchairs and mobility scooters can easily get to that mountain lake and the waterfall on that top trail.
There might be just a few roots and rocks, but it is more designed for that. And
Yeah.
there's only 3 parking spaces available at that. And if you want to get to that parking area, you have to drive past the Sulphur Springs parking area.
And
It's
go
just
up, but it's just past it. So
not very
for
far.
any of you out there who are have
Mobility
some,
challenged.
that's right, that might be a good spot to get to. It's very short from the parking area to the mountain lake, and you get the wonderful benefit of seeing the lake
Short,
and
but
seeing
still very beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting from that vantage point. You can very early on, you can look down from that trail and see the top of the gazebo we were talking about.
Yes. Yeah, you can see the top of it. So this is nice. So this one is a piece of cake trail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very easy to do. It's the payoff is really great for a short hike that's easy to do. The payoff on this is fantastic, which is why you and I keep coming back to it.
Yes, yes, it's a fan favorite of ours, if we're the fans.
So now, in our closing segment, let's talk about what gear we used.
Okay.
On this particular day, we did these 2 hikes together at the same time.
Yes.
We wore our water bladder backpacks
Mm-hmm.
so that we would have plenty of water on the hike. We had our hike. I had my hiking shoes. You had your hiking boots. And we both had one hiking pole, which we found to be enough, right?
Yes. Yes, and I think we covered this in the first episode, but one of the reasons, even if you don't actually need the hiking pole, it's nice to have it in case of snakes along the path, in case of trying to see how deep water is, or just to keep your hands up and moving so that your hands don't swell. And so I did switch back and forth with that one pole between my 2 hands a little bit. Mostly I kept it in my right hand, and I like it for the extra balance.
Especially on descents, right?
Yes.
Descents is when I find the hiking pole to be the absolute most useful.
Yeah, because I'm 54 and I really don't want to fall and break a hip.
No. No, and it's, in the fall, well, it's winter now, but in the fall when the leaves start coming down, that can make some of those descents even more difficult
Slippery.
because you'll slip on the leaves. So that was our gear for this time. And of course we have our smartwatches that we use to track our steps. And I used AllTrails to track the progress as well as our pacing time, our descent and ascent, and to just basically track the trail progress.
Yeah.
So that was the gear this time. Pretty
Yeah.
simple.
I had my hat, my gloves, and my vest at the beginning of the day, and they all went into the extra zipper pocket of my backpack by the end of the day. But I am all about comfort, listener. Let me let you know. I will be comfortable. If I'm cold, I want something to keep me warm. If I'm hot, I want to be able to put it away. So that's maybe I might have just a few control issues. I'm not sure.
Maybe. I can't say that for you, but maybe you can. Well, hey, thanks for listening again. Please, if you like this podcast, subscribe to it on any of the podcast servicing apps that you may use. This should be available on all of them. We would love to hear from you. Leave us feedback, leave a review, and you can send us an email at casualclimberspodcast@gmail.com. If you have questions, if you have comments and suggestions, we would love to hear from you. And again, thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you.
See you out on the trails, everybody.